Well then, let's get started. I'll basically say this is the official start so that Wilma will know where to chop off all the all the extra. So welcome everyone, glad you're here. This is the first session of the Sakai Virtual Conference for 2017, which is fabulous, and I'm glad that everyone is joining us. We have a nice crowd of people here. I'm going to be talking about how we go about developing faculty through our annual, what we call LAMP Camp conference. I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a minute here. But I am Martin Ramsey. I'm the managing director of the LAMP Consortium, and so that means that I work with lots of different institutions instead of just one, which I like very much. I find that to be a really good thing. Before I really get into this, I need to tell you just a little bit about the LAMP Consortium itself. People often ask me what we are, and my answer that I've come up with that really I think summarizes it really well is we're a community. We are a group of 18 colleges and universities and other educational organizations that have banded together to work with Sakai. Most of our members are small. You can see this on the screen here. And some of them are not even what you might think of as traditionally colleges. For example, we have the National Dance Education Organization right here. If you are a dance instructor in the United States, most likely you have taken courses from NDEO, and you've taken them through our instance of Sakai because you want to get certified as a dance instructor. But they only have a staff of about 5 people. They're located outside of Baltimore, Silver Springs, Maryland, and but they use Sakai, and so they're an educational organization. They're just not a traditional college like some of you are. So we're this group of educational organizations that have banded together to share a single instance of Sakai. And if you think about that, that'll kind of blow your mind just a little bit, because 18 different institutions sharing a single instance of Sakai could get quite tricky. And I will say that it does get quite tricky at times. We have some interesting challenges, but we're hosted by Longsight, so we don't worry about the hosting and the upkeep and all that sort of thing. We let Longsight worry about that, and they have been great to us. They've been wonderful to work with through the years. My group provides the support and the administration, the leadership, and so forth. I don't want to leave anybody. I'm going to mute someone here. No, can't do that. Louisa, we're picking up a lot of background noise from you. So if you wouldn't mind to mute yourself, that would be helpful. I think it's you. We share lots of different software. It's not just Sakai. So we do share Big Blue Button, for example. We use Verisight as our plagiarism detection software. We have a fairly new product called WarpWire, which we really like for video streaming and hosting. We are exploring Karuta, the new open source e-portfolio tool. So you can see that as a group, we think about what software is going to be needed for teaching and learning, and we try to adopt that as it makes sense for the group. And as I say, like a group idea, we really have this notion of shared governance. We really like working together, which is why I picked the picture that I did that's on the screen right now. And I also want to emphasize that we're financially self-sustaining. We've never taken any money from anybody. The cost of the hosting and the support and all the things that go along with that is basically paid for by member dues. And so it continues because our members continue to support it, and we provide services that they really need. So it kind of gives you an idea of who we are. We've been around for a long time. We've been live on Sakai since 2006. In fact, this picture that's on the screen here was taken on April 26, 2006. That's the West Virginia State Capitol in the background. We're on the campus of the University of Charleston, West Virginia. And there are 5 schools represented in that picture. In fact, some of the folks who are there are still very much involved in the LAMP Consortium. But that's the day we went live. That's the day we said, I guess this is it. We sort of looked at each other and said, are we live? I think we are. So we've been around with Sakai for a long time. We're currently on version 11.4, eagerly awaiting version 12. And it might help you to know that we were the winners of the Mellon Award for Technology Collaboration in 2008. That was kind of a unique thing. I wrote up a proposal that said, we think that we're doing something kind of special here, and lo and behold, we won. Ira Fuchs, who was then at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, said, and I want to read this quote because I think it describes us quite well. LAMP has shown the higher education community that it is possible for institutions having limited resources to install, operate, and sustain even the most sophisticated software provided that they work together to meet their common challenges. And I think that describes the LAMP Consortium quite well. That's me on stage there receiving the award with Vint Cerf. Contrary to popular belief, Al Gore did not invent the internet, but Vint Cerf came up with the IP addressing scheme, and it was a real thrill to be on stage with him. I was a little bit awestruck, I have to admit, but that was kind of a cool thing that happened to us to win that. So that kind of gives you an idea of the LAMP Consortium. And let me just say this: there are a number of you who have joined us now, and I am happy to take questions. If you want to ask me a question, I would be happy to do that. You can either just speak it, or I'm going to open up my chat window here to make sure that in case anybody uses the chat, that I'll be able to see that as well. So if you don't want to speak, you don't have to. You can chat, and I'll watch for that too. But the real question that I think this session is about is, how do you go about building a community like this? How do you go about developing faculty like this? And I have 5 things that are sort of my watchword for how I think about this. One is there has to be a shared worthy purpose. And of course, teaching and learning, particularly at small institutions that may be struggling to manage sophisticated software, to me, that's a really worthy purpose. And of course, because we share Sakai, we're sharing what we're doing. It has to have a sustainable financial model. Many of you may have been involved in grants that went fine until the grant period was over, and then it kind of went off the edge of the cliff. And we actually experienced that with a previous software package that we were using back in the early 2000s. So I'm really proud of the sustainable financial model that we have. There has to be regular, meaningful communication, and we do that through a monthly web conference, very similar to this. A whole bunch of folks get together every month. I have an agenda, and there are things that we need to talk about, decisions we need to make. We do a little bit of training sometimes, make decisions together, and so forth. And there have to be these facile processes for shared work. And I would submit to you that Sakai, you couldn't look any farther than Sakai to find something that does that. So we have all kinds of project sites going on, as well as the teaching sites that you would probably expect that we would have. And finally, and this is the real emphasis today, is this idea of multiple shared experiences. People sharing experiences does something that is really powerful for sort of growing them together. And so I want to talk about that, and that's kind of the idea of our LAMP camp. Basically, I believe if you get people together around a worthwhile topic and you provide opportunities for interaction, where they can talk to each other and understand each other, take care of the logistics so they don't have to worry about, some of the things that they might have to worry about, magic happens. It does happen. And so that's kind of been our experience at LAMP Camp. Some of these photos, these are all LAMP Camp photos. This one in the middle here, I'll point to with the silly hats on. That was at a Sakai conference in, I believe, maybe 2006, 2007. I can't remember the exact year, but that's Chuck Severance in the middle there. And he donned a goofy hat with us and had our picture made, which I thought was pretty cool. So anyway, it's just, if you can get people together around a worthwhile topic and share an experience, things really work well. We've been doing this for a long time. These are the brochure covers for the last, 7 or 8 of our conferences. This last one that we did, that we just finished up this past summer, we called On the Trail of the Tiger, because we were really looking forward to what Sakai 11 and 12 had for us. We celebrated our 10th anniversary the previous year, and so forth. You can see that we've been doing this for quite some time. But let's just talk a little bit about how we go about doing this. First of all, the focus of the conference, and we call it the Pedagogy and Technology Conference. The focus is always on pedagogy first. The people that we attract are faculty and some others as well. You can see the second bullet there. Audience is faculty, instructional designers, and administrators, but mostly faculty. Because we focus on teaching, we focus on pedagogy. It's about teaching, that's the main thing. And then we say it's about technology. So technology should always be in support of the pedagogy, not the other way around. I'm rather notorious for saying that the technological tail should never wag the pedagogical dog. And folks have heard me say that so much that they're sick of it. But I really believe that these are important principles. And so we organize the conference around this idea of pedagogy, and then facilitated by technology. We do aim at faculty, but we also have a fair number of instructional designers who come, and I'm glad that they do come because they often help the faculty think about issues of instructional design. For example, accessibility is becoming a much more important part of our conference, and it's because of one of our instructional designers who has really brought that to the fore, saying we need to think about these kinds of things. And we do have a fair number of administrators who come, deans and provosts, who come because they recognize that this is something that's important for their campus. Now, remember, we're small schools, and so, you know, sort of everybody knows everybody, but we all get along quite famously, and it's kind of been a historical precedent that we march everybody outside and take a picture of them during the conference. So these are pictures from various years that are just kind of fun on various campuses and so forth. We have tracks for both new users and experienced users, and I thought what I would do is show you just a page from one of those brochures. This is the one from last year. It's the first page. Excuse me. It's not everything. This is just one page of the agenda, but it sort of gives you an idea. We try to organize it so that there is a track that's for the folks who are newer, because we get a fair amount of faculty who are either new to Sakai. They may have had experience with Blackboard or Moodle or one of the others like that. But so they're new to Sakai and they need to sort of be shown the ropes in Sakai. Or frankly, again, because these are small schools, they're just new to the whole idea of distance education. I should also say that we don't always press, we're not about just distance education. We have a fair number of schools. In fact, I would virtually say almost all of our schools started out with just enhancing the traditional classroom, but then began to branch out into distance education. So we have some of them now that are very much into distance education, and others that are still using Sakai as a way of, as I say, extending the classroom in time and space. You know, I often say to faculty, so you get to look at them, you know, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 o'clock, but that's all you get to see them. What about the rest of the time? Well, with Sakai, you can basically sort of extend your classroom into the residence hall, into their after hours and so forth, by providing them with resources or discussion forums or whatever the engagement strategies are that you use. So basically, we try to focus on helping folks who are either new to Sakai or are new to this idea of distance education. And so this first track here, and you can see that Terry Golightly of Johnson University came up with this nice little theme last year. She called it the Tenderfoot Trail. So she talked about packing for the trip, which is sort of what you need, and then making camp. She called that Bobcat Bend, and then on the trail, Eagle Eyrie. She was getting into the lessons tool and so forth. So she had a series of three that were sort of, that built on each other, helping folks who were very new to Sakai begin to use Sakai in useful ways. By the end of this third one, they had really begun to put together their own courses. And I thought it was interesting because I sort of roam the halls and make sure that everything's going okay. The number of people that attended grew as these three went on. So that told me that we're on to something, that this was a good way of doing it. We also typically, in this sort of, I don't want to call it the beginner's track, but the ones who are less experienced, we tend to have sort of overviews of tools. So new features in the lessons tool, or getting started with attendance. We're using the attendance tool that came out of University of Dayton. Even though it's still in beta, a lot of folks are using it. So this first track here tends to focus on people who are kind of newer to Sakai. And then the middle track tends to focus more on kind of either folks who are more experienced or more technical topics. So for example, here we've got the technology roundtable. So we have Matthew Jones of Longsight, who was very instrumental in bringing Sakai 11 to the fore, and Chuck Severance, who we now list as being with the University of Michigan. But he was there and did a great job of sort of talking about the technical stuff behind the scenes. Matt also talked about sort of the Sakai roadmap, because who knows better than he does. Dave Evelyn and Laura Geckler from Notre Dame talked about sort of why did we pick Sakai over some of the other choices we may have picked. It was a little bit of a comparative analysis, and I thought that was good. But then we got into Jiras and Java and so forth. We got into some heavy-duty CSS, and so that's the kind of middle track. And then the third track tends to be focused more on sort of administrative type things. Doesn't always have to be that. So, for example, Darwin Glassford from Kuiper College talked about transformational learning And I thought he was a good topic, a good title, Lessons from a Theologian turned online learning director. And that's exactly his background. In fact, that was a really well-received talk, and several people had him come to their campus to sort of do the same thing. We had a roundtable about, how are you using Sakai in non-classroom ways, in extracurricular ways? That was really interesting. And Laura Geckler from Notre Dame talked about data visualization, and on and on and on. You get the idea. So we tend to have these 3 tracks, and that seems to work fairly well. I don't think we're able to handle more than 3 tracks. At least we haven't grown to that size yet. But it's kind of nifty. And in fact, it just occurs to me. Hang on a second here. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I will copy this URL so that you can go to the website. I'm going to just send it out as a text message so that everybody can see it. You can easily go to that website if you want to see more about our past agendas and so forth. We've got them all on the internet. So that kind of gives you a little bit of idea of what it's like. So let me now talk about faculty development and this whole idea. As I said, faculty who are new to distance education are really challenged to think about their pedagogy and about student engagement. I'm rather fond of saying that if you are still gripping the lectern and reading from your dusty notes from 30 years ago, this is going to be hard for you. I don't know how else to say it. But we challenge them to think about, okay, you're used to engaging students when you can see their faces, so how can you engage them when you can't? And there are really good strategies for doing that, but we challenge them to think about that sort of thing. Like I said, the faculty who are new to Sakai start building their first course under the guidance of an experienced instructor, when in this case, it was Terry Golightly. And honestly, I think one of the most important things that happen is that experienced faculty learn from each other and from experts in a particular topic. Folks really like it when we have John Padgett talk about plagiarism detection. He's the chairman of the English department at Brevard College, and he knows a lot about that. And he's really got some good pedagogical approaches for using plagiarism detection. He doesn't think of it as a chance to gotcha doing something wrong, but more as a chance to have a conversation about academic integrity and proper citation and so forth. He uses it as a really good pedagogical tool, and people always appreciate that when he talks about that sort of thing. And frankly, everybody gets the opportunity to sort of experience this LAMP community. Really enjoy getting together, as hopefully from some of the pictures you've seen that it actually is a lot of fun. So here's kind of the we've got a lot of background noise coming from somewhere. I'm going to turn that down. So if you can mute your mic, I'd appreciate it. And by the way, don't be ashamed to unmute your mic if you'd like to ask a question or join in the conversation. That would be fine too. So here's this is my philosophy of a conference, and I think probably first of all, you have to have topics of interest. If there's not something that people are interested in, then they're probably not going to come, or if they come, they're going to be bored or not interested or not engaged. So for example, up here in the right-hand corner, this is John from Kentucky Christian, who's a really good video, what's the word I'm looking for? He's a video creator, video director, video editor. I mean, he does it all, and he does it with some fairly simple equipment. In fact, he encouraged us. He said, hey, you've all got a smartphone in your pocket, and it's probably got a better camera on it than many of the cameras that were available, not too many years ago. And so he brought in a green screen, and he brought in some lights, and he talked about how to set up lights, and he talked about the use of a green screen. Obviously, you don't always have to have a green screen, but he was pushing faculty to include videos, short videos, as part of their courses in Sakai. But he wanted people to understand how to make a decent video and how to edit it and so forth. So we actually had one of the participants walk onto the green screen, make a few comments and walk off. And then he showed how he could put that together with a Sakai screenshot behind him using the green screen and chroma key, so that the person who was walking in front of the camera could actually point and say, here's where you log in up here, and here's what. And it was quite effective, and he did that in an hour session, and people really, really liked that, because that was something that they realized they need to get into is doing more video. So just an example of a topic of interest is really important. It's also important to get your presenters prepared. Many of them are good, but I'm going to be blunt and say that some could use a little help. Strangely enough, they may be faculty, but they are not always sure how to do the best kind of presentation. So I typically send out several emails to the presenters in advance, sort of reminding them that, this is a friendly audience, but you still need to be prepared. You should be, a little practice wouldn't hurt. Talking about speaking distinctly and, the kinds of things that are sort of, you would think would be always understood, but sometimes people need to be reminded of them. This picture of the three women with their hands in the air, we had a little problem with the technology. We wanted to make sure that they were able to show a video that they wanted to show, and we got it working well in advance of when the session started, which was a good example of a prepared presenters. And I said, all right, everybody say Yahoo, and they did, and so I took a picture of it. The agenda has to allow, this is really important, the agenda has to allow for interaction. In fact, over the years, we have, let me back up a little bit here. In this agenda here, you'll notice that the first session went from 9:30 to 10:30, and then the next session doesn't start until 11 o'clock, and you say, wait a minute, there's a half an hour in between there. That's on purpose. That half hour is so that people will interact with each other. Yep, we provide coffee and that kind of thing, fruit and snacks, but it's really important that people are able to interact with each other, both in the sessions and outside the sessions. And so we've actually expanded that break time from what we used to have. We used to have 5 minutes, and it was sort of like hustle from one place to the next. And now we find that it really helps if we just let folks chat in the hallways. That's an important part of a conference. And that means you have to have space that allows for interaction. So this last year, we had the conference on the campus of Lees-McRae College. It was actually in the library, so you can see all the books in the background. But it was a wonderful space for interaction. There were just sort of kiosks sort of sitting around and comfortable chairs, and we had coffee. And I was kind of shocked that they allowed us to have coffee in the library, but they did, and it was great. So it just allowed people to just sort of chit-chat with each other. Here over on the right, you see Chuck Severance, and that's Neil Caden there. And that's Josh Wilson, who is newly at Longside, and he came to the conference. And so this was the first meeting of those three. And I thought, well, this is an important point here. And it happened, in between sessions at Lamp Camp. So you have all this kind of stuff going on. And by the way, interaction happens over meals as well. And we'll get to that in just a minute. So I think this whole idea of interaction at a conference is really, really, really important. And designing that in, building that in is something that is critical for having a successful conference, in my opinion. This is something that I just really believe. A workshop really begins when the participants put their feet on the floor in the morning, and it doesn't end until they go to bed at night. So that means that every minute of their day, I don't mean that it needs to be scripted, but I mean that it needs to be consciously thought about. So when they get up in the morning, where are they going to go to breakfast? How far is it? Are there going to be tables where they can sit and chat with each other? Are they going to be able to have sort of a slow start to the day for those who need a slow start? And for those who want to go out running, is there a place to do that? That kind of thing. And even until the very last thing is done and you send them off to go to sleep at night, a workshop and a conference needs to have it be very deliberate. You need to really think about what happens during the conference. Another thing to think of is sort of what I'm going to call logistics. So again, these are probably no-brainers that you would say, well, of course you need to do that, but we've got to think about this sort of thing. So registration, for example, needs to be easy. It needs to be something that they can do quickly and easily. We have to think about transportation because we have people coming in from all over, and so where are the nearest airports? Some of our schools where we hold these conferences are in, shall we say, somewhat remote areas. And so, for example, this last one was in Banner Elk, North Carolina, which is way in the mountains. Beautiful, beautiful place. But the nearest airports were sort of an hour and a half, 2 hour drive away. So that became an issue. So you have to think about transportation. You have to think about lodging, of course. We have until now, and I'll explain this when I get towards the end here, but we have until now been having this on college campuses. And so the lodging has been shall I say, Spartan. Their dorm rooms. I don't know how else to, so that means that they don't have some of the accoutrements that a hotel would have. And so lodging becomes a little bit challenging. So that meant that I had to send out emails ahead of time saying, if you're used to a special pillow, you better bring it. And if you want a reading light at night, you might ought to bring one of those too, that sort of thing. We've had a few residence halls where, this is in the summertime, where they weren't air conditioned, and that became an issue. And so, just all these little things have to be thought about. I'm a big believer in name badges. In fact, in the opening plenary session, let me go back to our agenda here. We always have a welcome plenary session, and I sort of talk to everybody about working as a consortium. And one of the things I do is I lay down this idea of, please wear your name badges, because it's so much better to be able to call somebody by name and recognize what institution they're from, rather than just sort of saying, hey, you, and I wonder who that was that I was just talking to. So I really encourage people to wear their name badges, just sort of as a courtesy to the other participants. We, and this is very much like is being done here in the Sakai virtual conference, we use Sakai itself as kind of our virtual conference proceedings. I encourage the presenters to upload their, it's not just their PowerPoint, it's anything they have. So if they have some lessons pages they want to show as an example, or if they have some audio files or video files, this can all be taken care of through Sakai. And so we use Sakai as kind of our virtual conference proceedings. We used to try to print stuff, and one of our members said, we should eat our own dog food, meaning we should use Sakai for the purpose that we say it should be used for, and use it in our conference as well. So it's been many years ago that we started using Sakai as kind of our virtual conference. And then we do, of course, a follow-up survey, and we get good reviews. This idea of would I recommend the conference to others, people agree or strongly agree, and provided information I can put to use, and the quality of the sessions was high. That's all we do. We score pretty well on that. And when we have somebody who says, I wouldn't recommend it, I'm really keen to know, why wouldn't you? What is it that concerned you about the conference, and how could we make it better? We're always looking for ways to make it better. So under this idea of shared experiences, this is another one of the things that I frequently say. What happens in the hallways is as important as what happens in the sessions. And I really believe that. I've just seen it happen year after year after year. So here you have, for example, Kevin will recognize the back of Laura Geckler's head there. That's Terry Golightly and Laura Geckler, getting to meet for the first time and having a nice chat. This is Will Ashley from New Brunswick, and two folks from Davis and Elkins getting to have a nice chat. Here's some folks chatting over dinner and so forth. So what really happens in the sessions is important, but what happens in the hallways is equally as important. And I think that if we recognize that, that gives us a better workshop. In fact, I would say that you can't control what happens in the hallways, but if you've designed things well, if you've taken care of the logistics well, as I said before, magic happens. Good things happen. You can't control it, but just try it and watch what happens, and you'll see. You'll be pleasantly surprised, at least as I have been through the years. We do have several plenary sessions. I seem to be going back to this slide a lot, but I'll do that again. We start off with a plenary session. And we'll end with a plenary session. We always end up with a big plenary session in which we kind of debrief the conference, think about next year, what would we like to see, what worked, what didn't work. We do a good debrief at the end of it, and that seems to be a really helpful thing that we do. I often, frankly, use clickers so that I hand out clickers to the audience and ask their opinion about some things, and we can sort of see in real time anonymously what people think about the conference. And that's in addition to the survey that we send out afterwards. So those are there's these plenary sessions. I strongly believe in shared meals. The late Tim Wiblin, who was a very good friend of mine and really helped get this off the ground at Ohio Valley University, he used to say that a group that breaks bread together becomes friends, and that's really true. And so we actually do take people. We have a breakfast on site. We have breaks during the session. We have lunch, typically in the cafeteria of the host institution. But then we go off site for a shared meal for our evening meals, and those are lots of fun. And I encourage people, sit with somebody you didn't come with, sit with somebody you don't know, And so there's lots of this great interaction that happens in these shared meals. And then we also do some shared activities. Now, I can't say that everybody loves these, but I'll give you an idea of what they look like, and you can see why people may or may not love them, because I'm notorious for asking people to do something that may be a little outside of their comfort zone. So you can see that, we've had people put on blindfolds. We've had people use hula hoops. We've had people get really close to each other. We've had people do some crazy things where they were walking across boards and so forth. This one here is that we call that the Great Egg Drop. So people had to build out of soda straws and masking tape an egg delivery system that would allow you to drop an egg from about 15 feet off the ground and have it not crack. And of course, when it fails spectacularly, which is kind of fun. And so, we had lots of fun with that sort of thing, sort of team building activities. And I find that these shared activities help sort of cement the group even more. In my opinion, these are not just games. Every one of them has a real pedagogical purpose. And so there's always a debrief afterwards. There's always a what did we learn from this? There's always a what's our takeaway and how can it sort of make a difference in our work and our teaching when we go back home. So they're not just fun. They're actually quite serious in purpose. And I think in the long run, people kind of like them. They think they're okay. So let me talk about, well, let me pause there and ask if there are comments or questions at this point. I want to talk about what we're planning for this coming year, but just I'd love to know if you have any questions. Like Kevin, you and I were talking before this started. What have I left out? What should I have talked about? What do you want to know about?
Martin, how many of the attendees are typically faculty members that are teaching versus people that are supporting those faculty members?
Good question. I could get the raw data to tell you exactly, but my instinct would be about 70% faculty and 30% others. That's a guess, but I don't think I'm too far off. Does that make sense? I mean, I guess we're finding more and more folks are sort of interested in what we're doing and are not necessarily faculty, and they're coming anyway, which is fine with us. We've sort of been growing. Did you have something else, Kevin?
No, that was it. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? Something that you'd like to chat about? Okay. I'm just looking to see who all we've got here. Oh, lots of folks that I don't even know. That's great. Some of you I know, but most of you I don't. That's cool. All right. Well, let me talk about next year, just so you'll know, 2018. We're going to try something a little bit different. Oh, here we go. Have I ever thought about doing an online LAMP camp? Says Alice. That is a really good question, Alice. And this is going to be amazing. My answer is going to be surprising, perhaps, because of what we're doing right now. But typically, I would say no. Here's why. We do these monthly web conferences. And so folks are very used to getting together virtually every month. This happens every month like clockwork. We've been doing it since 2006. I could show you the notes from meetings, that just go way back into history. They're dusty and nobody will ever read them anymore. But, we really have been meeting that long, and we're very, very used to getting together virtually. So to me, LAMP Camp is the opportunity to actually meet face to face. I mean, that's part of it is actually having a chance to interact in person with folks. And so I have not thought about doing it online, almost because LAMP Camp is the antithesis of the online. It's the opportunity to get together in person. And besides that, it'd really be hard to do this kind of stuff online. Although I'm very eager to see how the virtual karaoke goes today. I think this is a crazy idea, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works. Okay, please, other questions? Here we go. Motivating academics to participate in an online environment. Oh, that's really, really good. I will say this, Alice. It's interesting you asked this question. One of the sessions that I did at our last LAMP camp, this was this one here, I said I was trying to do some thinking about how could I do these kind of games that I'm so keen on, these kinds of things here, but in an online environment. And I actually did come up with a couple that I think could actually be done successfully online. There's an activity that I call Win As Much As You Can. It's, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's based on the prisoner's dilemma. And I could see using the idea of this game called Win As Much As You Can, because essentially what you do is you decide what you're going to do in advance, and then everybody reveals what they're going to do at the same time, and there's a score based on what has been done. And that could be done virtually. I don't think you have to be in person to do that. I'd want to make sure that there was a debrief afterwards, but that could be done through a video conferencing tool like Zoom or Big Blue Button. So there's ways to do it. So yeah, all right. So yeah, more okay. I've got you. I understand the challenge. We should talk offline. I'll be glad to send you a copy of my Win As Much As You Can, and you can see if that might be something that might work for you folks. So yeah, those are really good questions. I like that. Okay, just so you'll know, in 2018, we're changing. Well, no, wait a minute. Laura says, "Was I a camp counselor back in the day?" Nope, never been a camp counselor. but I do. Thank you. Well, you said these things are what sets you apart from run of the mill, and I agree with that. Here's probably the answer to your question, Laura, in a way. I've never been a camp counselor, but I have been a consultant since 1993, and one of my clients has been Saturn, the car company. Now, they're not in business anymore, but in the late 90s, Saturn was quite an interesting place. We did a lot of outdoor workshops, literally where we had people, climbing up poles and falling out of trees, and all safe, of course, but, real good outdoor experiential learning. And I think I learned from Saturn how important it is that every aspect of the workshop be attended to and paid attention to. And so that's probably where it came from. I've never been a summer camp counselor, but I have worked for Saturn. So that's probably where that came from. Okay, 2018, we're going to try something different. We're not going to go to a college campus because, frankly, we're kind of outgrowing our college campuses. We have a little bit of a hard time finding residence halls where every person has their own bathroom, which turns out to be kind of important. Having it closer to an airport, as I mentioned earlier, is important because we have a lot of people who are now coming in from a fair distance. We have one of our members is a seminary in Costa Rica. They train Spanish-speaking pastors, and they come a long way to come to our conference. So we appreciate that. So we're going to try doing it basically in my hometown. I'm fortunate here to have a really nice hotel called the Historic Boone Tavern Hotel. You can see the pictures there, which I think people will like. And so we're gonna get together there, and it's got some nice grounds. There's some room for some activities outdoors and so forth. So July 24th, 25th, and 26th is going to be the dates, and the location is going to be Boone Tavern Hotel. We're in negotiation, so I guess the contract hasn't been signed yet, but oh, and Kevin says he stayed there a few years ago. That's beautiful. Well, thanks. I appreciate you coming to my town. And by the way, here is there's the URL for the conference itself. In fact, we got registration open. If you would like to come, in fact, I think that's my last slide here. If you'd like to come, we'd really like to have you. We'd be most delighted if you would think about joining us. The cost is quite reasonable, $350. So it's not an expensive proposition to come to, and you would add to us. I guess I should say that we LAMP have joined the Apereo Foundation as a full member, and so we're trying to reach out to more Apereo member institutions, Sakai institutions like yourselves, and we would very much welcome you coming. So got time for one last question, if there is one, before the timer clicks over and says I need to get out of here. And if there aren't any questions, I want to say thanks to everybody for being a part of everything. You've hung in there with me. This is a lot of fun. Alice, shoot me an email and I'll send you that Win As Much As You Can. That would be great. All right, folks. I think that's it for this one. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.